Hey guys! So, today we are going to talk about a bit of a subscriber statement that I saw this morning actually. And it was in response to a video, or rather a response to my own response, which I thought was, well, basically I had this request. So let's get in, let's just get into it. So basically, there had been a question, or let's call it a request for me to make more of these interview videos or interview question videos specifically. In other words, there are, and I can understand that, it's not an uncommon request. People want to know different questions that they may be asked in an interview, and they would like to know the answers to these questions. And for various reasons, let's just say that I responded by saying that is something that I want to avoid. I will make them, don't worry about it. I will try to make them as well as I can, but what I don't want, and this is what I told this viewer, I don't want to make too many of these because it is what I call sheep. And what I mean by sheep is basically that an interview, if I show, guys, unless you didn't know that, the people who make videos such as why I quit Google, how I got a job at Google, how I solved the interviews question from Google or Facebook, or all these videos are just cheap publicity in my world. It's cheap publicity aimed towards playing on junior developers' fears. And the fear that you have is that you're not smart enough, good enough. You want to prepare yourself in a certain for basically to respond to questions. I have a lot of people who reach out to me for different jobs that I've had or been part of interview processes where they simply want tips. How do I pass this interview process? So it's very common. It's extremely common. And what I said was basically that I don't want to make things like that because I believe that it's destructive and it's not a good, like, if you want to be a true professional, you should have a very different mindset. And the person in question now asks this magical question. But Frederick, in order for us to become professionals, we surely have to pass an interview. Yes, you do. You do have to pass an interview, and you're most likely going to face quite a few of them. But you see, the way that I look at it is that by not going down the route of trying to memorize a large amount of different interview questions, like the standard questions and the solution to these, by not doing that, you're actually going to be more likely to stay in software longer. Now, just let me explain. This is what I said to this person. You see, foolish juniors, because I'm sorry, this is foolishness, believe that by knowing the answers to set questions on a test or something that an interviewer might ask them within the job process is going to help them somehow to get that job, and they're going to get in. This is true. If you for some reason happen to be so fortunate that you just happen to study the right questions and have the right answers, you will get that job. And now comes the hard part. Because now, when you're on the inside, you're going to have to prove that you know the stuff that you claim to know in the process. It is the dumbest move in the world for a junior developer to try to inflate their skills, to try to sell the idea that they're more skillful than they are. Because what you are doing in the interview process, if you do that, is that you are basically raising the expectations on you as an individual to a certain level. The perception of the people working in that company is now going to be that, oh, this person knows these types of things. Because the idea of an interview process, I'm sorry to say that this is not always the case. There are interview processes that are really shitty, and there are interview processes that are really, really good, and it's a little bit of a crapshoot when it comes to like, it varies a lot from company to company, I'm sorry to say. But the idea is to screen a person to figure out if they're actually good enough to work in the company in question. And if you are not good enough, if you fail you should not be there, because ideally the test that you take should be a reflection of the skills that you actually require in order to work in that environment. But if you get in because somebody posted a solution to a specific problem on the internet, and you get in without actually knowing your stuff, you're going to get fired. You're going to get fired hard. Because the thing is, guys, your journey just starts at the interview. After the interview comes real work. And unless you have unless you have the skills that it takes in order to actually survive within that company, you're going to not only go through an enormous amount of personal pressure. I've seen people who've claimed to know certain tools and be really good at them, and they get in and they don't know the stuff, and all of a sudden all those expectations they raised when they actually was in the hiring process is going to go from expectations and a lot of promise to great big massive disappointment for the employer. And depending on the employer, they might just fire your ass immediately, or they are going to be extremely unhappy with your performance, and the anxiety you're going to feel from being in that environment is going to be very, very harsh. Sure, you hang out there for a little while, make some money, and move on, or most likely you're going to get fired because you're not going to be able to sustain this image that you created for yourself by passing these interviews with flying colors. And then you're in a worse situation than you were if you didn't get the job. And what do I mean by that? Simple. If you're dismissed for a position, you don't get a job because you didn't pass the screening process. That's not a problem. Because the next company, all right, you didn't get that job, you're looking for that job instead. Nobody cares about that, because you're not even going to list the company in question as a reference because you haven't worked there. But what happens when you actually have gotten the job and you get fired for incompetence? Because you thought that you were clever by having a little bit of a cheat sheet, knowing all the answers, getting into a position, and finding out at the end of the day that you weren't good enough to have that job, and then you get sacked. That's a worse situation to be in, because now you have to have that discussion, and in some fashion, in a very graceful way, explain to your next employer that there's a good reason somehow why you got fired. Because, guys, getting fired as a programmer, or like being dismissed at a previous job, especially for being incompetent or for simply not being quote unquote good enough, that is a much harder discussion to have than not having anything at all. Being fired is always a bad thing. So that's the thing I want you to take away from this. You may think, if you're very short-sighted, that by learning interview questions and pre-studying for an interview that you're making the right move. But I will argue that is actually you making a big mistake. The goal that you should go for, if you want to be a long-term professional, is not to study the answers to the questions. The goal is for you to accept the fact that you are going to keep on learning for the rest of your career. And the goal is to get as good as possible at your craft. Not at the questions. Fuck the questions. The questions mean absolutely nothing once you have the skills, because that's what the questions are there to test. If you don't have the skills, you should not pass the test. That's the idea. And the beautiful part about having the skills is that the questions become very meaningless over time if you actually do invest and become really good at what you do. You can even, and the beautiful part, guys, is even the best programmers in the world who are super geniuses, much smarter than you and me, will get dismissed or not get a job due to various reasons. It can be anything from that the company doesn't like them as an individual, or they're a bad culture fit, to that they simply had a test that day, or a tester that day that was in a bad mood, and all of a sudden that person got dismissed. It's all possible, guys. But a person with real skill, real software development skills, will get another job. Trust me on this, they will. And frankly, it's very similar to being, like, if you have this mindset that you should just study the questions and stuff like that, it's very similar to a poor person pretending to be rich and getting in financial debt in order to have this image of being something they're not, and sooner or later it's going to, people are going to see through it, and it's most likely just going to end really poorly for the individual in question. And this is especially true for IT, because trust me, if you fake skills or if you try to inflate your own skills, a person with those skills is going to see through that very, very quickly. So even if you do magically somehow remember all the answers and get them all right and you get the job, odds are that you're going to be noticed very, very quickly, and you're going to get fired very quickly once you actually start working, unless you actually know the stuff that is required in order to have that job. Have a great day.